The key snapped in the lock. For a moment I just stood there, staring at the broken metal between my fingers, the late afternoon heat of Georgia pressing down on the back of my neck. My suitcase leaned against my leg, still carrying the scent of pine trees and river water from my 2-week retreat in Oregon. I tried the lock again out of pure instinct, pushing the remaining stub into the keyhole. Nothing. Not even a click. My electronic door panel flashed red when I pressed my thumb to it, as if it had never seen me before. The porch camera, the one my daughter insisted I install last year, did not blink awake or greet me. It stayed dark, reflective, like a blind eye refusing to acknowledge its owner. This is my house, my home for 20 years. And suddenly I was standing outside it like a stranger. "Can I help you?" The voice came from inside. My heart stuttered. The door opened a few inches, and a man I had never seen before stepped into view. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a neatly ironed polo and friendly confusion on his face. Behind him, through the gap, I saw my foyer, except it was not my foyer. The walls were painted a warm russet instead of the pale beige I had lived with for decades. My framed family portrait was gone. My grandmother's mirror removed. Even the shoes lined near the entrance were new. None of this was mine. I swallowed. My throat felt like sandpaper. "I live here," I said. "My name is Marcus Hill." The man's expression shifted from polite to uncomfortable. "Sir, we bought this house 2 weeks ago. I'm Aaron Whitfield." The air seemed to fold inward. My knees nearly buckled, and I had to grip the doorframe, my doorframe, to keep myself steady. 2 weeks ago, I had been sitting on a wooden dock in Oregon, watching water ripple under a pink sunrise, thinking about how peaceful life had finally become. That peace cracked open, like thin glass. "Impossible," I whispered. "I own this house. I bought it years ago. There must be a mistake." Aaron stepped back but didn't close the door. I could hear a woman speaking from deeper in the house, her voice tense. "Call someone. Call the police." "No, wait," I managed, fumbling for my phone. "There's been some mistake. My daughter, Alana, she was supposed to be watching the place." My fingers shook as I tapped her contact. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Dad," her voice came through, tight and impatient. "Are you back already? There are people in the house," I said. "Strangers. Alana, what is going on?" Silence. A long, heavy one. Then, a sigh I recognized from her teenage years. That sigh that meant I was being, in her mind, dramatic. "Dad." I sold it. The world tilted. The heat deepened, and everything inside me went still. The ride to the hotel felt like drifting underwater. I heard the officers speaking to me, their voices gentle, almost apologetic, but the words hardly registered. The world outside the window blurred into streaks of streetlights and evening shadows. Only one thought kept circling inside my head like a slow, relentless tide. My daughter sold my home. When we reached the Peachtree Midtown Inn, one of the officers handed me my suitcase as if he were afraid I might break under the weight of it. The lobby smelled of polished wood and citrus cleaner, a sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling inside my chest. The receptionist looked at me with polite sympathy when she heard my name. "Your daughter arranged the reservation, sir. She said you might need rest after traveling." Rest. As if rest were possible when your entire life had been erased in your absence. I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, the soft hum of the machinery echoing in the hollow space behind my ribs. When the door to my room clicked shut, the silence wrapped around me like a shroud. I sat on the edge of the bed for several minutes, staring at my hands, still smelling faintly of river and cedar from Oregon. Then instinct, the part of me shaped by 20 years as a civil investigator, took over. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. Within seconds, I was logged into my encrypted cloud drive. Every important document I had ever owned, scanned, and backed up. A lifelong habit formed from watching too many people lose everything to someone else's paperwork. The Hill Family Trust popped up first. Established in 2008, designed to protect the property until both my children reached stable adulthood. And right there, plain as day, the requirement that any sale of the house demanded 3 signatures: mine, Alana's, and my son Malcolm's. My chest tightened. Malcolm and I had drifted apart, but one thing was certain: he would never sign away the house we grew up in without speaking to me. I opened the scanned copy of the sale authorization file Alana had apparently used. Malcolm's signature was there, beautifully shaped, perfectly spaced. Too perfect. I enlarged it, tracing the familiar curve of the M with my eyes. Malcolm's hand always dragged slightly on the upstroke. Always. This signature did not. My phone buzzed. Malcolm's name lit the screen. "Dad," Alana called me. "She said you were confused. What's going on?" I took a slow breath. "Malcolm, did you sign anything about my house?" His answer came like a blade. "No, I signed nothing." And in that instant, the final piece clicked into place. This wasn't confusion. It was fraud. The next morning, I drove to Midtown Atlanta with a steadiness I did not feel. The city moved around me in its usual rhythm: commuters rushing, buses sighing at stops, street vendors setting up carts. Everything looked normal, but nothing in my world was normal anymore. Alana's townhouse sat at the end of a manicured cul-de-sac lined with identical brick facades and spotless driveways. A place where families posed for Christmas cards and neighbors waved politely. As I walked up the stone steps, I reminded myself to breathe. I reminded myself she was still my daughter. The door opened before I even knocked. Terrence filled the doorway, shirtless, tattoos creeping up his neck like ivy, holding a mug of something too dark to be coffee. His grin was slow and smug. "Look who's here." The prodigal father. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The living room was immaculate, decorated in whites and metallics, the kind of space staged more for Instagram than for living. Alana stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed tightly over her chest, wearing a silk blouse I had never seen before. "Dad," she said sharply, "you could have called." I held her gaze. "Why did you sell my house, Alana?" Her shoulders lifted defensively. "You were never home. You don't need that much space. You don't even like the neighborhood anymore. That is not your decision to make." Terrence leaned back against the counter and smirked. "Man, you're so dramatic. We solved a problem. You should be thanking us." I turned to him slowly. "Terrence, you owe $410,000. You didn't solve anything. You dug a hole and shoved my life into it." His eyes widened just for a second before he masked it with a laugh. "Who told you that?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Alana's jaw tightened. Her voice dropped to a familiar, icy tone I recognized from her worst teenage days. "Dad, you're 52. You need stability. We found you a room in a senior living community in Marietta. It'll be good for you. Structure, medication monitoring, people your age." Every word peeled something inside me. I looked at my daughter, really looked, at the girl I once carried on my shoulders at the county fair, at the young woman my late wife used to pray would find her way, and at the stranger she had become. I picked up my coat. "I'm not your burden," I said softly. "I'm your father." And justice, not acceptance, was my next step. I drove straight from Alana's townhouse to downtown Atlanta, the skyline rising like a promise and a warning. Every turn of the wheel felt like shedding another layer of denial. My daughter had not made a mistake. She had made a choice, and choices had consequences. Judge Leonard Porter's office sat on the 12th floor of an old stone building that had once housed one of Georgia's earliest law libraries. The brass plaque on the door was discreet, the kind of sign used by men who did not need to advertise their influence. Porter had been my mentor when I worked in civil investigation. He taught me the value of procedure, the importance of documentation, and the cold efficiency of truth. When he opened the door, his eyebrows rose in immediate concern. "Marcus, you look like hell." I sat down heavily. My daughter forged my signature. She sold my house. There was a long silence. Porter leaned back, fingers steepled. "Tell me everything." I laid out the timeline, the missing signatures, the trust requirements, Malcolm's denial. When I finished, Porter exhaled slowly. "This is bad, but not unsalvageable. We start with verification." He made a single phone call. 10 minutes later, the conference room door opened, and a woman stepped inside carrying a slim black case. Dr. Miriam Boone, forensic handwriting examiner, former federal analyst. She shook my hand with firm precision and laid out her tools with the calm confidence of someone who lived inside the truth. "Show me the documents." I opened the files on my laptop. Boone adjusted her glasses, enlarged the signatures, and leaned in. After only 20 seconds, she clicked her tongue. "These are forged, and not well." She pointed to the slope of the H, the inconsistent pressure, the unnatural formation of the L in Hill. The writer hesitated. They were trying to mimic rhythm they did not have. "And this," she added, enlarging the signature on Malcolm's line, "was written by someone naturally left-handed, but forced to write with their right." Alana had been left-handed since childhood. Porter's jaw tightened. "That's enough for probable cause." "But we're not done." Boone opened another file. The notarization was fake. The seal did not match state records. The broker, listed on the sale, had ties to an Atlanta ring, known for flipping properties stolen from elderly homeowners. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a criminal operation. And now, I had the team to dismantle it. Porter moved with the precision of a man who had spent his life in courtrooms. By sunrise the next morning, he had drafted and filed an emergency injunction with the Fulton County Superior Court. He worked the phones like a conductor leading an orchestra, contacting judges, clerks, and investigators who still owed him favors from decades past. By noon, the order was signed. Everything tied to Alana and Terrence would be frozen: checking accounts, savings, investment portfolios, credit lines. They would wake up financially paralyzed. But the delivery of the news was where Porter's brilliance shined. A process server named Desiree, a woman with calm eyes and impeccable timing, waited until midday, when the HR department Alana managed held its weekly staff briefing. Through the glass walls of the corporate training room at Fairview Talent Solutions, Desiree stepped inside wearing a neutral expression and holding a thick envelope. "Miss Alana McAllister, you have been served." The room fell silent. Every employee stared. Alana's face drained of color as she accepted the documents with trembling fingers. Desiree's body camera recorded everything for court use. The panic spreading across Alana's eyes was almost immediate. She flipped through the first pages, and her breath caught sharply. Accounts frozen. Emergency injunction granted. Mandatory appearance. Fraud investigation pending. By the time she stumbled out into the hallway, her phone was already in her hand. When mine began ringing, I knew exactly what was coming. I answered calmly, "Yes, Alana." Her voice was sharp, frantic, cracking under fear. "Daddy, what did you do? My cards are declining. Terrence's cards are declining. The bank says some court froze everything. Why would you do this to us?" I closed my eyes briefly, letting the words settle. "I didn't do anything to you, Alana. You did this the moment you forged my name." She inhaled sharply, as if I had slapped her. "This is ruining my life." I kept my tone steady. "You ruined your own life when you stole mine." There was a choked silence on the other end. Then a sob, smothered in anger. "You think you're so righteous. You won't win." Terrence said, "We'll fight this." "Then fight." I ended the call before she could spiral further. Porter entered my hotel room just as I set the phone down. "It has begun," he said quietly. And it had. The hotel room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner, but beneath that calm was a tension thick enough to choke on. Porter had left an hour earlier with a promise to file additional motions in the morning. I had taken a shower, changed into clean clothes, and sat at the small desk reviewing a timeline of every document Alana had forged. At 2 a.m, someone began pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of pounding that comes from a fist filled with fury. I froze, listening. The pounding grew louder, more frantic, shaking the flimsy hotel door on its hinges. "Marcus! Open up, Marcus!" "Terrence." I reached for my phone and hit the record button before stepping closer to the peephole. His face filled the narrow glass, flushed, drenched in sweat, eyes wild and unfocused. He swayed slightly, as if alcohol were the only thing keeping him upright. "Open the damn door, old man. We need to talk." I cracked the door just an inch, leaving the chain lock on. Terrence pushed so hard the chain snapped taut, clinking like metal teeth biting down. "Terrence, you need to leave." He laughed, a sound so bitter it scraped the walls. Leave? You think I can leave? You think I can go anywhere when you froze everything? His breath reeked of liquor and panic. You destroyed us, Marcus. You destroyed my entire life. I kept my voice level. You destroyed your own life the day you decided to gamble with money that wasn't yours. His expression twisted into something darker. You think this is about gambling? You have no idea who I owe. You have no clue what you've put us in the middle of. These people, Marcus, they don't send letters. They don't negotiate. They collect. I tightened my grip on the doorframe. Who are you talking about? Terence leaned closer until only the chain separated his face from mine. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. The magistrate. The name meant nothing to me, but the terror in his eyes did. He's coming for the money. All of it. And since you froze everything, he'll come for us. He jabbed a shaking finger at me. You think you're safe in this place? You think you can hide behind lawyers and judges? Accidents happen to men your age. Heart attacks. Falls downstairs. People go missing all the time. A direct threat. Clear. Unfiltered. Perfectly recorded. Security. A voice shouted from behind him. 2 hotel guards rounded the corner. Terence stumbled back, cursing, swinging wildly at the air before breaking into a stumbling run down the hallway. I shut the door with shaking hands and locked every latch. The recording saved instantly. Porter would want this. But for the first time since this nightmare began, a cold realization settled into my bones. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was war. By sunrise, the recording of Terence's threat had already been emailed to Porter, saved to 3 separate backups, and forwarded to Robbie Carter, the private investigator I trusted more than anyone in Atlanta. Robbie had been a detective before he left the force, the kind of man who could find a shadow hiding behind another shadow. He called me at 8:30 sharp. I listened twice, Robbie said, his voice low. Terence sounded terrified. Who is this magistrate? I told him everything Terence had spilled in the hallway. Robbie exhaled slowly. I'll find him. Stay put. And keep your head low. By the afternoon, Robbie had already sent me a string of encrypted messages. Each one contained a piece of the puzzle Terence had hinted at, and each one was worse than the last. The magistrate was not a nickname. It was a title. Real name, Jonas Marrow. Former Army intelligence, dishonorably discharged after an internal investigation went mysteriously cold. After leaving the military, he vanished for 6 years. When he resurfaced, he had built an underground loan network across Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. He didn't own a legitimate company. He didn't file taxes. He didn't leave witnesses. Robbie sent a photo grainy, taken from a distance. A tall man, in a tailored charcoal suit, exiting a warehouse in East Point, surrounded by 2 massive ex-military enforcers. This is who Terence owes, Robbie added, and he is not the kind of man who waits politely for repayment. I swallowed hard. What exactly does Terence owe him? Robbie typed back. More than he owes the casinos. More than he owes the banks. And far more than what selling your house covered. I leaned back in the hotel chair, the weight of everything pressing on my spine. Terence had dragged my daughter into a pit of wolves, and Alana had dragged me in right behind them. But Robbie wasn't finished. Marcus, there's something else. A second photo came through, a nighttime scene. A parking garage. Terence crouched beside a silver sedan, his hands shaking as he handed a thick envelope to one of the enforcers. You see the papers in his hand? Robbie wrote. Those are loan agreements. But here's the kicker. He sent a close-up, a signature. Alana's signature. Except Alana was at work the day the document was notarized. There were timestamps, witnesses, camera footage. Terence forged her name, just like she forged mine. My heart pounded. Robbie's final text came 5 minutes later. This isn't just about your house anymore. This is a ring built on stolen identities and stolen homes. Terence and Alana aren't the first, and they won't be the last. The hotel room suddenly felt smaller, colder, more dangerous. Robbie called again, voice firm. Marcus, you need to understand something. The magistrate doesn't forgive debt. He collects lives. And now you are officially involved. 2 days later, I received a message from Alana. A short one, cold, controlled, pretending normal. Dad, you left some things in my garage. Come get them before we donate them. Donate. As if my life were a pile of unwanted clothes. Robbie wanted me to ignore the message, but I knew better. If Alana was reaching out now, it wasn't kindness. It was desperation mixed with spite. She was on the edge of losing control, and people on the edge make mistakes that become powerful evidence. I drove to her neighborhood just after 10 in the morning. The sun was bright, the lawns freshly trimmed, children riding scooters along the sidewalk. A perfect, peaceful tableau. Except standing in front of Alana's immaculate townhouse was Terrence, holding a beer at an hour most people were still sipping coffee. "There he is," Terrence announced loudly when I stepped out of my car. "The man of the hour, the homeless king himself." Neighbors looked up. Curtains shifted. A couple walking their dog slowed to a near stop. Alana stepped out of the garage, wearing a fitted athletic outfit and a smile crafted out of spite. "Dad, we were just talking about how much you must be enjoying that hotel. Must feel familiar, not having responsibilities anymore." She gestured into the garage. "Some of your things are over there. Though honestly, they're pretty worthless." Spread across the concrete floor were my old carpentry tools. The toolbox my father gave me at 18. The level I used to build shelves in Alana's childhood bedroom. Even the hand-carved hammer from my grandfather. Terrence kicked the toolbox. Hard. Metal clattered, scattering across the floor. "Oops, guess they're even more worthless now." A gasp rippled through the street. Mrs. Johnson from next door clutched her gardening gloves to her chest. Two teenagers across the street raised their phones to record. Good, I thought. Let them see. Alana picked up a framed photograph from the pile. It was a picture of me holding her on my shoulders at Stone Mountain, both of us laughing. She looked at the photo, then let it fall. The frame shattered, glass spraying across the driveway. "Maybe you can find a shelter that will hang this for you," she said sweetly. I knelt, collected the broken pieces, and placed them gently in my car. When I stood, neighbors lined the sidewalk, their faces a mix of disbelief and disgust. Evidence, witnesses, truth on display. Alana wanted humiliation. Instead, she had just handed me victory, and she didn't even know it yet. The morning after the scene in Alana's driveway, I sat in the hotel business center with a single purpose forming in my mind like a sharpened blade. Terrence's threat, the forged signatures, the stolen house, the involvement of the magistrate, none of this was isolated. It was part of something bigger, and bigger problems required bigger forces. The federal government. I opened a new email using an encrypted relay and attached every document Robbie and Porter had uncovered. Terrence's fake agreements, Alana's forged signatures, the notarization anomalies, and the money trails disappearing into shell accounts across 3 states. I wrote a clean, clinical summary and sent it to the Financial Crimes Division and the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit. Within 3 minutes, an automated message appeared. Case opened. I leaned back, letting out a slow breath. The wheels had begun turning. By noon, my phone buzzed. "Robbie, again." "Marcus, something's happening. They're at the banks." He sent a live photo taken by a security contact of his. 3 agents in dark suits speaking with a branch manager at Piedmont Community Bank, Terrence's bank. Then another photo. Agents at a second location. Robbie's voice came through the next call. "They're freezing accounts connected to Terrence, Alana, and every LLC tied to those forged documents. Federal level, this is bigger than a loan shark now." I nodded to myself. Good. But there was another development I didn't expect. At 2:30, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a cautious, gentle voice echoed through the line. "Mr. Hill, my name is Sarah Parker. My husband and I, we're the ones who bought your house." I closed my eyes. The Whitfields. Sarah hesitated. "We didn't know." The agent pressured us into a quick sale, told us another buyer was waiting. She said it was an estate situation and that she swallowed hard, that you were incapable of managing things. My jaw tightened. Another lie added to the chain. Sarah continued speaking. voice trembling. We started digging after hearing about the investigation. And then we learned the agent was the same one involved in 2 other suspicious sales. Elderly homeowners. Fast closings. Below market value. My chest tightened as the pattern became undeniable. "Mr. Hill," Sarah said softly, "if the court needs us, we'll testify. We just want the truth out. We want our money back, and you deserve your home back." For the first time in weeks, something warm pushed through the cold weight that had settled around me. Support. A witness. A family willing to stand beside me. The federal government now had evidence. And I finally had allies. The Fulton County Courthouse rose ahead of me like a fortress, its marble columns glowing under the late morning sun. Inside, the air felt colder than it should have been, as if the building itself demanded respect. Porter walked beside me, carrying a folder so thick with evidence it looked like it could choke a filing cabinet. Today was the preliminary hearing. Today, everything we had built would be laid before the court. Alana was already inside when we entered. She sat stiffly at the defense table in a charcoal suit that didn't match her. Too sharp, too severe, too desperate. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it strained at her temples. She refused to meet my eyes. Beside her sat her attorney, Clarissa Wynn, known across Atlanta as someone who never met a rule she didn't try to bend. A courtroom predator, dressed in polished navy silk. Judge Carlton Pierce took his seat, a man with a reputation for zero tolerance and a stare that could silence an entire room. He glanced at both tables. "Counsel, let us proceed." Porter stood, calm, steady, terrifying. "Your Honor, we are presenting evidence of multiple forged signatures, fraudulently notarized documents, and a conspiracy involving the unauthorized sale of a protected trust asset." He gestured to the projection screen as the first document lit up the wall. The purchase authorization Alana submitted. My signature. Malcolm's. Dr. Miriam Boone took the stand next. She spoke with clinical confidence, her voice slicing through the courtroom. The pressure pattern on the father's signature is inconsistent with his natural handwriting. The slope on the son's signature suggests hesitation, and the date stamp contains microprint errors that indicate manipulation. Clarissa tried to object. Judge Pierce didn't even lift his eyes. Overruled. Continue. When Boone revealed the timestamp conflict that Malcolm was in Chicago on the day the document was supposedly notarized in Atlanta, a murmur spread through the gallery. Then came phone records, emails, GPS data. Every piece fit together too neatly, too perfectly, to be coincidence. But the real explosion came when Terrence, sitting behind the defense table, suddenly lurched to his feet. "She planned it." His voice cracked through the courtroom. "She said if the house sold quick, she could put her daddy in assisted living full-time. Said he was slowing down anyway." Clarissa nearly tackled him back into his seat. Judge Pierce's eyebrows rose with lethal precision. "Miss McAllister, stand." Alana stood, shaking. The judge's voice cut through the air like steel. "Given the severity of the allegations, the forged documents, the financial inconsistencies, and your husband's statements, this court orders immediate surrender of all passports. Neither defendant is permitted to leave the state of Georgia." Alana's eyes finally met mine. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. The courtroom was still humming with tension when Porter rose again. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Every head in the gallery had already turned toward him, drawn by the quiet authority that radiated from him like heat from asphalt. "Your Honor," he said, "there is one more matter we need to address. One that changes the entire context of this case." Judge Pierce leaned back slightly. "Proceed." Porter opened a leather binder I had not seen before. Not the one we had reviewed in the hotel, not the one he used during the injunction hearings. This one was older, its edges softened by time, its pages thick and cream-colored. He clicked the remote. A new set of documents illuminated the projector. "This, Your Honor, is the actual Hill Family Estate Trust, established in 2004 and amended twice before the death of Mr. Hill's mother, Evelyn Hill." Alana's head snapped toward the screen. Her hands began trembling. The room fell into a hush. Porter continued, his voice even. "The property sold by Miss McAllister is not the primary asset in the trust. In fact, it represents less than 10% of the trust's total value. Another slide appeared, a list of assets, and the numbers were staggering. 9 rental homes across Savannah and Macon, 2 small commercial buildings in Augusta, 3 acres of undeveloped coastal land near Tybee Island, a municipal bond portfolio, several investment accounts, estimated total value, $3.8 million. Alana's lips parted, her knees buckled slightly, and only the back of her chair kept her upright. "This cannot be right," she whispered. Porter nodded. "Oh, it is. All verified, all legal, all protected." I felt the room tilt, not from shock, but from memory, my mother's voice telling me she wanted her grandchildren protected long after she was gone. She had insisted we keep the trust structure quiet, believing that too much knowledge too early could breed entitlement. She had been right. More right than she ever could have known. Porter turned toward the judge. Miss McAllister attempted to steal the smallest asset in a multi-million-dollar estate. She acted not from need, but from greed. And her actions jeopardized not just her father's security, but the generational wealth intended for her entire family. The gallery murmured. A reporter scribbled frantically. Alana looked at me with something shattered in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I held her gaze. "Because you were never meant to destroy what was meant to protect you." And now, because of her choices, everything, her illusions, her excuses, her future began to collapse. The courtroom emptied like a punctured lung, people spilling into the hallway, murmuring about the multi-million-dollar trust and the shocking collapse of Alana's defense. But inside Judge Pierce's chamber, the storm had only begun. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Langford announced as he rose, "the state requests immediate filing of criminal charges based on the evidence presented." He began listing them one by one: forgery, fraud, falsification of notarized documents, attempted exploitation of an elder, conspiracy to commit real estate theft. With each charge, Alana's shoulders curled inward, as if shrinking from a barrage she never imagined would be aimed at her. Terrence, seated behind her, muttered something too low to hear, but his eyes, jittery, frantic, were fixed not on the judge, but on the exit. He wasn't thinking about the law anymore. He was thinking about the magistrate. Judge Pierce nodded. "The state's motion is accepted. The court additionally orders a separate review for potential financial crimes to be forwarded to federal authorities." Clarissa Wynn, Alana's attorney, stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my client has no criminal record. She has been manipulated by her husband. She should not." Judge Pierce raised a hand. "Miss Wynn, your client committed premeditated fraud. Influence or not, she acted willingly." Clarissa's jaw tightened. Then Terrence snapped. "She did it for you." The words exploded out of him. "She said if she got the house fast enough, we could pay off the loan before they came collecting." Alana whipped around. "Terrence, stop!" But he was spiraling, fury and fear tangling in his voice. "You think freezing the account saved you? The magistrate does not care about judges or paperwork. He's going to come for all of us." The bailiff moved toward him. "Sit down," the judge commanded. Terrence didn't. He lunged toward the door, not attacking, just fleeing, but 2 deputies intercepted him. A scuffle broke out, and he was restrained, panting like an animal trapped in its own poor decisions. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Langford said calmly, "the federal task force has been notified. Mr. Terrence Carter is now under investigation for money laundering, wire fraud, and suspected involvement in an interstate loan ring." Terrence's face drained of all color. He sagged in the deputy's grip. Alana slumped forward, burying her face in her hands as the courtroom lights glared down like judgment itself. By the time the hearing ended, Terrence was being led away in cuffs, and Alana walked out, not arrested, but carrying a burden far heavier: the realization that the law was only the beginning of her punishment. The following week unfolded with a clarity and swiftness that felt almost unreal. Federal investigators moved quickly, pulling threads that Terrence had tangled for years. Meanwhile, Porter focused on one goal above all others: restoring my home. 3 days after the court hearing, I received an email from the Parkers' attorney. It contained a single line that made my breath catch. Title insurance has approved full compensation. The property will revert to you once funds are released. I read the sentence 3 times before it settled into meaning. My home, the place that held every memory of my late wife, every birthday of my children, every year of my life's quiet labor, was coming back to me. That afternoon, I met the Parkers at the house. Aaron and Sarah stood on the porch, both looking tired but relieved. The desert sage paint they had added glowed warmly in the sun. They had taken good care of the place, even in the short time they lived there. "Mr. Hill," Sarah said softly, holding out an envelope. "We're so sorry for everything you went through. You deserved better than this." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not letting them win. You taught us more about courage in a month than most people learn in a lifetime." My throat tightened. I shook Aaron's hand with both of mine. "You two were victims too. I'm grateful you stood with me." Inside the house, I walked slowly, touching the walls like greeting an old friend. The floors gleamed. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint. In the kitchen, the backsplash had been updated, tasteful, clean, not extravagant. They had improved my home, not violated it. Life had strange ways of revealing kindness. When I stepped back outside, the neighborhood felt different, familiar, whole. Mrs. Johnson waved from her porch. The kids across the street called out, "Hello, Mr. Hill!" As they raced their bikes past the driveway, I stood in the doorway and inhaled deeply. After months of chaos, betrayal, and fear, something finally felt right. My house, my sanctuary, was mine again. 5 days after I moved back into my home, a plain white envelope appeared inside my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting on the front was shaky, uneven, as if written by someone who hadn't slept in days. It was Alana's. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, the envelope resting in my palm like a fragile thing. Finally, I opened it. "Dad, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I don't blame you. I'm living in a studio off Glenwood now. It isn't much, but it's what I can afford. I'm working 2 jobs, morning shifts at Evergreen Market and nights at a family diner on Memorial. It's the first honest work I've done in a long time. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for help. I just need you to know that I see everything now." Terrence didn't push me into greed. He just encouraged what was already inside me. I thought I deserved everything without doing the work. "I'm sorry I hurt you. Alana." I read the letter twice, then a third time. There were smudges near the bottom, maybe tears, maybe spilled coffee from exhaustion, and something in my chest shifted. Not forgiveness, not even relief, but something softer than anger, something human. 2 days later, she came to the house. She stood at the bottom of my porch steps, wearing a faded work uniform and holding another envelope. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't even come close. She simply extended the envelope, her hand trembling. "First restitution payment," she said quietly. $200. Her voice cracked on the last word. She wasn't the polished woman in designer clothes anymore. She looked smaller, humbled, reshaped by the weight of consequences. I accepted the envelope. Alana turned, then paused. "I know I don't deserve a place in your life, but I want to earn one. Someday." She walked away slowly, her shoulders hunched, her steps heavy from long shifts and hard lessons. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. I didn't forgive her that day, but for the first time, I believed she might someday become someone worthy of forgiveness. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm I had forgotten I knew. I repaired the garage shelves that Terrence had kicked apart. I repainted the front door a deep shade of blue, the same color my wife once said reminded her of calm seas. I rebuilt what was broken in the house, and slowly, what was broken in me began stitching itself back together. One evening, Malcolm flew in from Chicago and stood in the doorway of the living room, taking in the restored space with a long, slow exhale. "It feels like home again," he said. "It does," I replied. We spent hours talking not just about the legal mess, but about the years we had let distance grow between us. Pain had a way of clearing out everything unnecessary, leaving only what mattered. Before he left, Malcolm asked a question I hadn't expected. What happens to the trust now? For the first time in months, I smiled without bitterness. We protect it, I said, and we use it the way my mother intended, to lift up, not tear down. Together we contacted Porter, and by the end of the month, we established a scholarship fund under the Hill name for youth in underserved communities. A legacy built from something that nearly destroyed us. Alana continued sending her small payments, $200, then $100, then $300, when she picked up an extra shift. Each envelope arrived without expectation, without manipulation, just work, just effort, just slow, stubborn rebuilding. I never invited her in. Not yet. But sometimes she stood on the sidewalk and waved, before returning to her bus stop. And sometimes, on days when the world felt less heavy, I waved back. The magistrates' organization fell apart after a federal sweep took down half his network. Terrence took a plea deal. 18 months. Then supervised release. He wasn't my concern anymore. One evening, as the Georgia sun lowered behind the houses, painting everything gold, I sat on my porch with a mug of tea and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long while, peace wasn't something I had to chase. It came to me on its own. And in that quiet glow, one truth settled firmly inside me. Family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by choices. By who protects you. By who stands with you. By who rebuilds instead of destroys. Justice had cost me dearly, but dignity had been worth every step. And forgiveness, when it comes, will be earned, not given.